You're listening to the Rite Retirement Show.
The 70% of people out there listening to the show today are going to need some level of care. It doesn't necessarily mean that 70% are going to end up in a nursing home, but 70% of people will need some assistance out there. The biggest fear is running out of money for the retiree, but what we see is not enough people spend enough of their money.
Cris prides himself in what matters to you. This is the Rite Retirement Show.
Hi there. Welcome to the Rite Retirement Show. I'm Luann Fulmer, and I'm joined by two amazing and experienced advisors from WG Financial Group. That is President Cris Wallace and Graham Bauer, and both are certified financial planners here to help you plan smarter and retire stronger. Now, if you have questions about anything we cover today, you can call or text the word VISIT to this number, 256-937-2010. Get a complimentary discovery session. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook throughout the week. Just look for WG Financial Group 256, and you can catch us anytime on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, okay? Just search for that. And our motto is plan, retire, and play. That's what we want for you. That's what we talk about every week. Hello to you both, Cris and Graham.
Hey, Luann, glad to be here with you as always.
Thank you.
Good to be here. Good to be with you, Luann.
So today we have a very special day, and I first want to bring up the fact that a lot of your clients do charitable giving, and we're going to be talking about that today.
Yeah, we are. I think it's important to talk about this. I know that within our client base and just the world in general, a lot of people are charitable. And again, this is a no judgment zone. So if you don't give to charity, it's okay. Maybe this episode might nudge you in that direction. So we think that there's some opportunity. It is something that we discuss pretty heavily with families that we work with that are charitable. We go through that in our discovery, in our strategy, and we just look at opportunities. If a family or an individual is charitable, then we just talk about options that they have. Because if you are charitable and you give a decent amount to charity, a lot of times it can help you offset some taxes. Now, I always like to say you give from the heart first, right? The tax side of things is just an added bonus or benefit. But I believe in, giving from the heart first. And then, like I said, the tax side kind of follows with that. So we do have a special guest, Luann. I'll let you kind of introduce Mike Booth. I have to be really careful, honestly. And I said this pre-show. As most people know, both Graham and I are big football fans, right? And so the National Football Conference, the NFC, well, and again, you're going to introduce Mike here in a second, but Mike works with the National Christian Foundation. So it's the NCF, not the NFC. So I'm just going to go ahead and warn the listeners today. If I say NFC, I'm talking about National Christian Foundation, not the National Football Conference.
Okay. Well noted. Well noted. We forgive you already. Okay.
You're asking for forgiveness well in advance.
Okay.
So, all right. Take it away, Luann. Let's introduce Mike. And we're going to do some really cool strategies today.
Right. Okay. Like Cris said, if you are in retirement or near retirement, the way you give to charity might be costing you a fortune in taxes and you don't even know it. So we're welcoming to our show today. I'm so excited about this. Mike Booth. He is with the National Christian Foundation. Mike is an attorney and also a stewardship expert. He helps families eliminate capital gains taxes by donating assets like real estate and stocks instead of cash. And Mike, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Luann. It's good to be here and look forward to having some conversations.
Yeah, we have a lot of good stuff to get to. So, Cris, I'm going to let you kind of head into some of the questions you want to give to Mike.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to do, Mike, is let's just start from the very basics and let's go back maybe earlier than what we discussed kind of pre-show. And let's just talk about your evolution into what you do now as far as helping individuals and families, with their charitable giving. And I do want to say this, Luann, because when you introed before, I think this show can be beneficial to you if you are any age. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be pre-retirement or retiree. I think if you're charitable, this can go for any age. So I want to talk about that. But before we get into some of the giving strategies and how they look and work and all of that, I'd like just to learn a little bit about you, Mike, and how you got into this industry and, how long you've been with NCF and, kind of what you've seen through the years and just how NCF has evolved, because I know your main headquarters is in Atlanta, Georgia, but you do have an office here in the Huntsville, Alabama area. So just kind of walk us through your journey with NCF, and let's just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, thanks, Chris. And but yeah, I am, now been with NCF, almost said NFC. You got
Oh,
that
no.
in my mind now. So
Oh, I'm so sorry.
that's okay.
Oh, so funny.
So NCF now almost right at 20 years, and been working with families with NCF, really advancing their charitable gifting goals. But as you hit on, we have certainly local offices throughout the country. We are headquartered in Alpharetta, Georgia, just north of Atlanta. But then we have, of course, an office there in Huntsville, and then in Birmingham, Jackson, Mississippi, but also beyond that, really all 50 states, we have coverage. I roughly have about 33 offices nationwide. And before coming to NCF, I was the director of the Foundation for Campus Crusade for Christ, or CRU. Before that was director of the Foundation for In Touch Ministries, which is Charles Stanley's ministry over in the Atlanta area. And then it also, before that, had been in private practice. So my title is Senior Gift Planner with the National Christian Foundation. And though you can't see me, if you could, you would know what hair I do have left is now gray. So that's how I get the senior designation. But again, just so you know, it's really the biggest draw is just being able to work with families. I really like one thing you said right out of the gate, and it's something very much in line with what we try to do at NCF. Really, giving starts from the heart initially, and then the tax benefits flow thereafter. And we, a lot of times, we try to help people say, well, if you already have that intent, that heart to give, it's always great to do some additional planning and be able to leverage the benefits and the tools that are readily available inside the code to be able to pick up that. So it's just a lot more fun doing this as opposed to private practice. It's always nice to see the needle move from the standpoint of philanthropy and being able to offer people opportunities to give. And it's always just amazing once you start working with these families to see their hearts of generosity as far as how they expand.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if you knew this because we've recently met, and I'm actually from the Atlanta area, so I've been to Pastor Stanley's church in Atlanta years ago. One of my ex-girlfriends I dated at the time went there, and so yeah, familiar. A lot of things you'll mention about the Atlanta area, if we get into anything like that, I'll know because I'm originally grew up there. So, and you mentioned your hair. I was just thinking. I used to say that mine has started to turn gray, but it's not turning loose. Well, now I have turning gray and some turning loose. So I have both happening at this point. And hey, it just comes with age and wisdom.
That's right. Wisdom.
Yeah. So let's, if we can, let's just talk about some very, very basics. And Mike, I'll give you some questions here in a second. So feel free to chime in on any of this. Graham, you as well, since you're here. You've been awfully quiet today, but we'll get you involved here shortly. Just from a charitable giving standpoint, I think there's many ways you can do it. Of course, you can take things to Goodwill and things like that. People are attending church most of the time. What I see is people just tithing and giving from their checking account. That seems to be the number one way to do it. You go and you write the check. I actually do all my giving online, and that seems to be the easy way to do it. But then there's a step up that starts to happen when you've got a family that's charitable. They're giving cash, but they also now have, let's just call it a joint with rights of survivorship account, or they have a transfer on death account. Now they have appreciated assets. And so let's just talk a minute why we think it's better to give appreciated securities as opposed to giving cash out of your checking account. Would you care to elaborate a little bit on that, and we can kind of talk back and forth about that?
Yeah, happy to. And just so you know, donor advised funds are great vehicles. They're certainly more commonplace now. I think people are getting, certainly acclimated to understanding them and using them. And in a lot of ways, kind of think of them like a charitable checkbook. Just have one centralized place that you can make contributions of cash, like you hit on. And a lot of folks, make gifts on a regular basis of cash, which is certainly great. But certainly if you could start looking in and expanding it to look at appreciated assets, like you hit on publicly traded securities is oftentimes a great initial avenue to be looking at, because a couple things, when you make a gift of a highly appreciated asset that you've owned for a year or more, usually you'll wind up picking up a fair market value deduction on the shares or the interest that you wind up gifting. And of course, that acts very similar to making a cash contribution as far as from the standpoint of offsetting or getting the charitable deduction. But secondarily, certainly with an appreciated asset, is that when there is a liquidation of that appreciated asset, the portion that's gifted to charity most oftentimes is able to avoid the capital gains tax exposure, or in certain circumstances that we can hit on a little bit later, at least mitigate it, but certainly a substantial savings that you can pick up on. So it actually winds up giving people more dollars available to use for gifting purposes. So that's it really kind of at the very beginning stages. So certainly cash is you can do, and you can, if you make a cash contribution or cash giving only, you can take up to 60% of your adjusted income on an annual basis as far as being able to deduct that. With when you're using in a highly appreciated asset or like a non-liquid asset, you're limited to 30% of your adjusted gross income on an annual basis. But a lot of times with proper planning, in particular if you have like large events coming up, you can do a lot of planning, because not only could you use the current year, you'd also have 5 years of carry forward. But again, that's just where people leveraging, obviously, you and Graham, from the idea of, where are they in their life events, and if they are charitable, happy to partner, with us or anybody else to start trying to map that out, to be able to say, how can you take advantage of those benefits, certainly from tax benefits, so it ultimately leads to more dollars for giving.
Yeah, we're big fans of both of those strategies. And they pair, I know we'll get into some of this too, but they pair really well a lot of times in conjunction with some other tax strategies. One thing, as you're talking about that, Mike, that I would like for you to elaborate a little bit more on, because you work on this side of it probably a little bit more than we do. When we talk to people about gifting stock and donor advised funds, things like that, one of the most common, I wouldn't say pushback, but I would say maybe hesitation that people have is, especially when it comes to things like church. I don't get this so much for charities, but obviously a big part of giving for a lot of people is church. People get a little concerned about the idea of not putting a check in the offering plate every week or every month or however they do it. And they think, oh, they're not going to know that I'm giving money if I'm doing it through this fund or I'm doing it through stock or whatnot. So could you speak a little bit to, maybe, since you're in this a bit more, the charity side of things and how they sort of view those donations, both for tracking purposes and also for, just basically, assuade people's concerns a bit that charities don't like you giving this way?
Yeah, great question. And I've had that certainly pop up before. And there's a couple ways of working through it. Like my home church here in the Atlanta area, in talking with our pastor, it's funny how the shift has been made, certainly since COVID days, to pretty much now all of the giving is virtually online. I don't think they rarely pick up any sort of physical check. But to your point, you still have that happen on occasion. So there's definitely been a trend, a movement away from that. But in situations where folks who still like to do that and actually have a physical check, our local office, and certainly Dana Keller there locally, could coordinate with folks in the Huntsville area to the point of actually getting a physical check, where they could actually then take that to their local church and put it in the offering plate weekly or monthly or whatever they might want to do. So there's workarounds to being able to do that. But again, from most charity standpoint, most churches that I've dealt with now, it's falling off pretty pretty good amount. And most everyone is certainly from the online
Mhm.
aspect of picking it up. And a lot of times, of course, if there are an approved charity on NCF's website or really to our holdings, a lot of times, of course, the transfers are even quicker as opposed to waiting for processing of a mail. Oftentimes, once it's approved and distributed, a lot of times it hits the account like the next day. So, from a charity standpoint, a lot of times they like it a lot more.
Yeah, I think also there's been, and I know we have this internally with some of our clients. They want to give weekly, and sometimes
Mhm.
it's just easier and cleaner to give a larger amount on maybe a less frequent basis. And I think what people don't take into consideration is the church. They have a budget, and they
Right.
know when money comes in, they've got it allocated. And I would say that's more of a habit type of thing. Graham, you talked about putting money in the offering plate because that's what we did all our life as the plate came around. But now I never do that. I literally just go online to my church and I make a contribution, and that's the way I give. So I think it's just, learning a new habit in some ways. And it's a lot cleaner, honestly. Like I'm not having to carry a checkbook and write a, decent check every week. I just do it online. It goes electronically and it's kind of done. So
Yeah, and as far as and you kind of alluded to this, Mike, and this is what we tell people as well. But as far as gifting through different types of funds or gifting stock or whatnot, the church or the charity is still going to know that you're doing the giving,
yeah.
correct? It's not
Mhm.
like they're going to be like, oh, this person stopped
Right.
giving all of a sudden. Um, and yeah, from what I have heard and people I've talked to, even at churches, even things like a stock gift where they have to liquidate it is not too much of a hassle and has also seemingly become a lot more commonplace nowadays. I've even heard from a lot of clients that their churches have started advertising that you can give that way, to say, hey, if you
Mhm.
got stock position, give that way, which I think is great. But, I think that still is the drawback from some people, just that concern of, oh, am I going to be inconveniencing them or whatnot?
Let's kind of talk about some opportunities. So we mentioned, giving cash. And
Mhm.
I would say, if you're giving smaller amounts, of donor advised funds probably not going to work as well. Donor advised funds, in my, I guess, experience, is when you start having bigger chunks of money go in. But one of the things, so when we say donor advised fund, you may also hear us call it a DAF, DAF. That's just our short term lingo in the office and in the industry. So if by chance I say DAF on here, then you'll know I'm talking about the donor advised fund, everybody. But we kind of look at that also like your own little personal charitable giving fund, essentially.
Mhm.
So you're going to fill it up and you're going to get the tax deductibility in the year of the gift. So in subsequent years, when you're issuing checks out of that donor advised fund to your church or your charity, there is not going to be any deduction. You really only get the tax benefit in the year of the gift. And I think a couple of opportunities here where you might utilize this is in some of our tax strategies that we've used for some of our charitable clients. A DAF works really, really well. But then you may have another opportunity if you're charitable, and let's just say that you work for a company that has publicly owned or publicly traded rather shares in a 401k, and you do what's called a net unrealized appreciation rollover. Here comes another acronym, NUA.
Hmm.
And now all of a sudden you work for, let's just say a company name here. Let's say you work for Boeing, and now all of a sudden throughout your career you've amassed 50% of your liquid net worth in Boeing stock, and now you've done an NUA rollover, and now you've got all of this net worth tied up in Boeing. You might consider gifting some of those shares to a donor advised fund to offload some of your responsibility, or I guess, weightiness to that specific company. And then you could take money that you would have given in cash and replenish with a more diversified basket of stocks. So you're getting your charitable gift going with the donor advised fund, and then you're taking cash and kind of replenishing the amount that you gave to the donor advised fund, and you're able to diversify that. And one of the good ways or the nice things about doing it that way is you avoid capital gains at that point. So if you're giving away appreciated assets and stocks, and then you're replenishing that with cash, that's a great tax efficient way to do that. Another opportunity for that, for gifting appreciated assets, would be if you have RSUs. So some companies issue restricted stock units, And those things mature and you take possession of those. And before long, you can be 20, 25% heavy weighted in your company. And not only do you have your financial capital with that company, you also got your personal capital with the company, meaning you, the employee. So you're drawing your paycheck from the company, and now all of a sudden you got 20, 25% of your net worth in the company. So if you have RSUs that are maturing, then you can talk about gifting away some to a donor advised fund. And another opportunity is you get a big bonus during the year and you're charitable. You might get, I don't know, $100,000 bonus if you're an executive for a company, and you need to offset some of that income that you're going to be getting in. So contributing cash to the donor advised fund at that point might be another opportunity there. But again, just to reiterate, you don't get anything past the first year. You only get the tax deduction during the year of the gift. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, because I think you'll be giving from that fund to charity, but it's going to feel a little bit different.
So, Mike, talking about these types of things, when you see people using a donor advised fund, obviously those are some scenarios we laid out. What are some of the more common scenarios that you see that would lead someone to set up and fund a donor advised fund?
Well, one thing I wanted to hit on real quick too, and donor advised funds are one of the great benefits, and a lot of times your tax preparer appreciates it more than anybody, is that you just have one centralized place for your charitable giving. So basically you have one place as opposed to doing multiple checks, every week or month and tracking those down. You just have one receipt, one centralized place that you have all your gifting. So from a tracking standpoint, it makes it a lot easier as far as preparing things from your charitable giving. So it's certainly very helpful there. But everything you outlined as far as potential options, certainly if you're doing, if you have a bonus one year, certainly leveraging a potential cash contribution to be able to offset some of that and advance your charitable gifting goals is good. Knowing that you can take up to 60% of your adjusted gross income on cash giving, and other type of asset giving gets more limited to 30% of your adjusted gross income. But again, it's in the cash situation. So oftentimes you might say, well, what are we really trying to accomplish? What charities are we wanting to fund on an annual basis? And so a lot of times what we do is to come alongside and work with their financial advisors and to be able to say, is there any other appreciated asset out there that might make more sense to contribute? And then I think it was Cris, you were talking about, it's a good strategy to always come alongside and then be able to take the cash that you're going to otherwise give and maybe turn around and repurchase shares in something else, maybe to diversify the portfolio. So again, from the initial stage, cash, publicly traded securities are always great things to looking at. A joke that we have around here at the gift planning office in Atlanta is that we say, friends, don't let friends give cash. Just because the joke is, because you can get a lot more leverage benefit out of giving an appreciated asset. So even rolling beyond the publicly traded securities, which really everything else I'm kind of going to hit on going forward works very similar to what we talked about with publicly traded securities. You would pick up a fair market value deduction for whatever you wind up gifting, and then able to avoid or mitigate the capital gains tax exposure on that. But again, other areas, Graham, that you're kind of asking for that I see as a lot of times when people are moving into, they might have a closely held business, a family-owned business, honestly, family-owned farms sometimes in similar type situations. And then they start figuring either they're selling it to a third party or potentially you want to use some sort of succession planning, maybe to get shares over to maybe children that are in the business or over to a key employee. Or in a couple of situations I'm working with right now where the family wants to ultimately wind up having the shares of the business go to the employees through an ESOP and being able to do that. So they make a gift into the donor advised fund for a percentage of the company and then have either the third party or potentially the ESOP, someone else buy that from the donor advised fund. So the benefit there is, of course, they pick up the fair market value deduction based upon whatever percentage they gift. And then again, they're able to avoid the capital gains tax exposure or mitigate it. And really that comes into play with S corporations. But again, there's usually a lot of benefits still there. And what we do is to come alongside and work with you as the advisors and generate an illustration to be able to show the family the economics, the benefits of moving forward with doing something like that. And the other area besides kind of closely held businesses that I see a lot of is certainly real estate, both residential, commercial properties, secondhand homes, beach properties people are no longer using. Again, it's just a tremendous asset to potentially use to help fund some of their ongoing charitable gifting goals.
Yeah. So those would be what you would call complex gifts. Some of the things you just mentioned, right?
Right.
That's kind of your specialty and what you see a lot of. I know the church I attend, they're expanding, but and I don't know how the family gifted them the property, but they did. And so somehow the land was gifted to the church. And I don't know if it was done through some sort of a CRT, a charitable remainder trust, or if it was done through a donor advised fund. But it sounds like to me, some of the things you just mentioned that actually just recently happened at the church I go to, I would imagine that churches see a lot of that complex gifting stuff to them.
Yeah, they can. And it certainly depends on the level of expertise of the church being able to hand that. I mean, there's certainly a lot of things from a charity standpoint they need to be careful of, certainly in dealing with gifts of an ongoing business as far as potential taxation to charity that they may not be mindful of. But certainly real estate, a lot of times residential property is pretty clean and straightforward. And some churches or charities can handle that. But when you start dealing with commercial properties, a lot of times, you have to be mindful of environmental liability issues that the church may not want to pick up. But again, that's where somebody like NCF would do this on a regular basis and have that expertise. If it's leveraged property, if it's got any sort of debt, there's things you need to be mindful of, potential negative impacts to the giver as far as from a deduction standpoint, but also to the charity. But again, that's where we would come alongside and run that analysis to be able to say, this makes sense, it doesn't make sense. You also alluded to the fact that a lot of times people might set up a charitable remainder trust or something like that. A lot of times a highly appreciated asset makes sense going into that because what they'll wind up picking up during lifetime is an additional income stream coming back to the person setting up the trust. And at the end of life, or either end of term of years, the net proceeds wind up flowing to charity. And of course, the donor advised fund can also be the charitable recipient. So all that to say, there's just a very wide range of opportunities that people can really utilize as far as really kind of what are they mapping out. One thing, and again, I appreciate y'all's initial comment, talking about charitable giving starts with the heart first, and always kind of have a simple approach that I work with families and the teams that I work with. They hear this all the time out of me is going like, pretty much from a structuring standpoint, we can figure out a way for someone to make a gift. Ultimately, at the end of the day, what's the main driver? What's the heart? What are they trying to accomplish? And then what I tell people is you never want to give away anything during lifetime that you or your spouse are going to need. Secondarily, then you want to make a gift to your dependents or your loved ones. How are you showing an expression of love to them? And then third is really the rest, the balance. Why have you been entrusted with the surplus? And a lot of times people will certainly wait till end of life. Can do a lot of planning from your wills and trust. These charitable trusts that we're talking about could do that. But then encouragement to be able to say, well, why wait till end of life? Why not start taking advantage of seeing some of the benefits now, the joy of gifting, but also picking up some of the tax advantages to be able to offset some of that. And again, we're very blessed from the standpoint of having a tax code. As far as from a world standpoint, I don't know of any other out there that really promotes charitable giving. So it's certainly something that's been at the founding basis of our country for quite some time. And so certainly taking advantage of that is a tremendous thing.
I want to continue the discussion. We've got to hop off to a quick break, but we're going to be right back. We're here with Mike Booth from the National Christian Foundation here in Huntsville. We'll be right back here in just a minute. If you're catching the show on the way to church, you're catching the half-hour show, so you can hop out to Apple Podcast or Spotify and catch the full hour, really just focusing on charitable giving today. If you'd like to come in and talk to us about your financial plan and your retirement plan and how charitable giving factors into that, you can give us a call at 256-937-2010. Again, the number's 256-937-2010.
Would you rather pay more or less in taxes? If you want to pay more, don't do anything. If you want to pay less, talk to Cris Wallace to see what's possible for you. Just text VISIT to 256-937-2010. Again, text VISIT to 256-937-2010.
Are you a federal employee feeling pressure from the early retirement offers like VERA, VSIP, or the Deferred Resignation Program? Recent government initiatives have introduced significant changes to federal retirement programs, making employees feel pressured to consider early retirement or face potential layoffs. At WG Financial Group, we help guide federal employees through these uncertain times. Our team understands the complex federal retirement systems and can help you make informed decisions. Call 256-937-2010 to schedule your complimentary discovery session with us today. We'll help you assess your options and create a personalized retirement plan to help you feel more confident. Visit WGFinancialGroup.com or call 256-937-2010 to book your session. Firm is not affiliated with the U.S. government. Investment advisory services offered through AE Wealth Management, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor.
Dreaming up your ideal retirement? It starts with a solid plan tailored to your unique goals. Set aside uncertainty by arranging a friendly, informative session with Cris Wallace. Just text VISIT to 256-937-2010. That's text VISIT to 256-937-2010. Begin charting your course with confidence.
And we're so happy you joined us today. This is the Rite Retirement Show. I'm Lou Ann Fulmer, here today with Cris Wallace, Graham Bauer, and also joining us today from the National Christian Foundation is Mike Booth. And the National Christian Foundation is the largest faith-based donor-advised fund in the country. Where Mike is an attorney, he's a veteran nonprofit advisor and a specialist in biblical stewardship. Today, sharing how donating non-liquid assets like real estate or business interests can completely eliminate capital gains taxes compared to traditional cash checks. So, very valuable information here.
Yeah, so I want to go back into what we were just talking about, the donor advised fund, because I feel like we know the difference here at the office and on the mics here, but I think the listener, there could be some confusion. So I really want to break this down in two different categories when we talk about donor advised funds and charitable remainder trust. So one thing I want to make clear is when you make a gift to the donor advised fund as an individual, the money's gone at that point. In other words, you're not going to get that back and be able to retract that back out. It's a gift to the donor advised fund, and then you're going to be able to give. You're going to take the tax deduction in the year to gift, as I mentioned it, and then you're going to give to whatever charity you want to give to after that. The charitable remainder trust is a similar type vehicle. It's kind of like, I would say, like a cousin almost. With a CRT, charitable remainder trust, it's usually, you want to have a charitable intent because at the end of the charitable remainder trust term, a minimum of 10% has to go to charity. But most of the time, there's two or three reasons why someone would do a charitable remainder trust. The biggest reason would be if you have charitable intent. Number two reason was you need income. So in a charitable remainder trust, you're going to maybe put in a highly appreciated asset. It can be stock, it can be real estate, and then you're going to sell it while it's inside the trust. And when you do that, there's no tax due at the point of sale inside the trust. Where the tax starts to come into play is on the distribution of income out of the charitable remainder trust for the period of time. One of the reasons you would do a CRT is to keep yourself in the 15% capital gains bracket and not really the 20%. So you got 20% plus 3.8 for the net tax as well. So you're really at 23.8. Setting up a CRT, instead of selling a whole bunch of stock, and again, I'm going to use stock as an example here. Maybe you retire and you've got $1 million of Nvidia, because that's one that's grown like crazy, or Apple or something like that. You might consider a charitable remainder trust where you donate the stock into the trust, and then you start taking income out of it. You sell it while it's in the trust. You can then, inside the trust, re-diversify the assets and start taking income out of the trust. And the way that the money comes out of the trust is worst first. So the least tax efficient money comes out first, but most people utilize it to try to stay down in that 15% tax bracket. So 2 different charitable vehicles there. You also do get some tax deductibility on the gift that goes into the CRT, just like you do the DAF, but the CRT is more of an income driven charitable vehicle, where the DAF is just straight charitable giving. Anything to add there at all, Mike, or did I cover that well enough?
No,
from an expertise level that you want to add?
No, it's it's a good distinction there, and certainly probably one of the main things is you hit on from a charitable remainder trust, and certainly it kind of gets if you need a potential income stream during life or for a period of time, it's certainly a great mechanism to consider. And then to your point, absolutely right. I mean, if you're trying to, what the distributions, you're going to try to obviously push that down into the capital gains rate. So certainly a benefit there. The donor advised fund, again, just remember, can wind up being the charitable beneficiary of the trust. So it is, it can be the true charitable designee for a charitable trust. So at the end of life or end of term of years, it could flow into the donor advised fund. And then you can, at that stage, be able to list out the charities that you wanted the distributions to go to. Or one of the beauties of it is a donor advised fund is a lot of times you can come alongside and have a successor advisor name. So from a legacy standpoint, if you really want to have children involved, you could name them as successor advisors where they continue to maintain the family fund as a donor advised fund. So in a lot of ways acts very similarly to having their own family foundation, but with a lot less of the headaches and potential ongoing filings, and certainly potential some additional tax benefits that would happen with a DAF as opposed to a private foundation.
Yeah, I actually have several families actually that they look at it that way. They look at it from the standpoint of, we're charitable as a family. We're going to go ahead and make those contributions to the donor advised fund. And if I pass away and there's still money in the DAF, then that's just going to turn into my kids' charitable giving fund for part of their life as well. And you're right. There's a lot less headache than setting up a private foundation.
Yeah. So when, in your experience, Mike, when people are setting these up, do you find it common for them to, if they want it to be a generational thing, do you find it common for them to have a list of charities they would like the money to go to and have their kids distributed? Or do you find it more common that they're just willing to say, okay, well, when my kids inherit that money, as the successor advisor, they're good to give it to whatever charities they decide on?
Yeah, great question. And a lot of times, part of what we do sometimes is certainly working with families, which I'm sure you do as well, from a family planning type of perspective. And again, the importance of getting children engaged early, as far as kind of hearing the hearts and desires of the mom and dad. So again, creating and fostering that heart for generosity is important. But if they haven't, if there's not a good, communication there, then usually you see that you just have someone list, hey, here are the 5 charities at the end of my life, successor advisor, make sure, these are distributed out. But the ones that really, from a legacy planning perspective, is where they come and actually meet on an annual basis. And I've seen families do that as early as, with younger children, and being able to go ahead and say, we have this in the donor advised fund, and maybe, there are two children. They might say, of the money sitting here, we're doing this amount of distributions this year. So maybe, son, you have $500, and daughter, you have $500 this year. What's charities are you interested in contributing, and start getting them engaged early, and being able to having that heart for distributions. Then they wind up becoming the successor advisor to the donor advised fund. So again, they're tracking with mom and dad as far as what's the legacy, what's the important part from a family dynamic. I've also seen it where families with donor advised funds, at the end of life, they just separate it out, and they might say, give a letter of instruction where they say, we want, if they have 3 children, we want the remaining balances to be separated out into each of the children's own individual donor advised funds. So then they can kind of take off and do what they want to, what's from a charitable planning perspective. So again, if we have enough planning, can always try to marry things up with their ultimate desires and goals. So lots of options there.
So would you say, and this is kind of what we were talking about a minute ago, but would you say if you're more interested in multi-generational charitable planning, a donor advised fund or a foundation would be a better option than going the CRT or the trust route?
Yeah, and I think I would go back to the CRT. I think one of the main motivations, again, is whether or not the person is going to need the potential income source. There might be some other reasons from a planning perspective you might consider it, but a lot of times that's going to be a lot of the motivational aspect. I think, Chris, you hit on that you do pick up the deduction with the CRT or charitable remainder trust, but it's not fair market value. It's tied to really a combination of life expectancy for the income stream. So again, what's kind of the motivation? If it's more, I need the deduction, a donor advised fund is going to make more sense. Yeah. From a legacy planning aspect, sometimes it might be a combination of using both a private foundation and a donor advised fund. With a private foundation, of course, you don't want to put highly appreciated assets into that because they're limited to a basis deduction, which a lot of times is not going to benefit them from a charitable standpoint. But if at the intent of kind of a more, some families, maybe they are, significantly blessed, have tremendous assets, and they want to make sure children maybe have an avenue to do some charitable good. They might want to set up a private foundation with cash so that they could actually pay the children inside the private foundation, but still do all their giving, like with publicly traded securities or highly appreciated assets with the donor advised fund. So again, there's, and that's just a whole nother world as far as from a planning perspective to get into. And I guess I would just say, as far as encouraging your listeners is, just know that there's lots of options to be able to come in and really meet people wherever they are. As far as, again, if they have that heart, that desire to do something charitably, it's just a cross section that you can really start pulling in. And the more runway, the better. So certainly don't ever hesitate to have conversations, certainly with you on what you're doing. And certainly if you're planning retirement and thinking about things in the future, 5-year windows are great. Certainly the more time, the better. But we can move as quickly as needed to as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when you talk about just the financials, I remember my grandparents being like really tight-lipped with their finances. And we're more of the mindset at the office that you should start to share some of your financials, to give them all the details, talking about the kids, but you should involve them a little bit, because I think some of this is a learned behavior. I really do. I mean, there's obviously hearts involved there, but sometimes when it comes to giving, like when I talk about just giving in kind assets, people are like, wait a minute. I mean, I'm not writing a check. And I'm like,
Mhm.
no, you're going to give shares of your stock position. And this is the best way for you to do it. And we're going to give it direct and in kind. And it just feels weird. So some of it is learned behavior. And even with clients that I work with today, I'm having to retrain, and they're normally used to giving in a, let's just call it like a clockwise cycle. And what I'm telling them to do is just counterclockwise. And it's actually better, but it just feels different than what they're used to. And I'll say this about some of my givers. There's there's like a correlation, believe it or not. And I don't have data on this because I don't sit there and study it. I don't judge it and all that. But I can definitely sense. I've sat with probably thousands of people at this point in my career with 20 plus years. There's a correlation of net worth in givers, and those that are really charitable seem to have a pretty good net worth. And there's the whole adage that you can't outgive God. And I know that that sounds very cliche to say, but man, I'm just telling you from the advisor seat, there it seems to be a correlation there. So I want to talk about that. The other thing I want to mention here, so we're talking about donor advised funds, charitable remainder trust. One of the things, the basic thing about giving that everybody needs to know and listen to is you always want to give your worst taxable asset to the charity. So if there's a way to give your IRA to the charity, and you do that at 70 and a half via QCD, that's what you want to give away because the charity doesn't pay tax. That's the beautiful thing about the way the tax code is written. So like if NCF receives a gift, they're not going to pay any tax on that, and you're getting rid of your tax liability. So the reason I bring that up is I think it's very common for people when they're putting beneficiaries on an account. And let's just say, for an example, they have a traditional IRA and they have a Roth IRA and they have two different beneficiaries. Let's just keep it really simple. They've got the spouse as the primary, and then they've got the charity as the contingent. Now, they've got a traditional and a Roth. For some reason, I've seen it where people will come in and that's how their beneficiaries are set up. And I'm like, what are you doing? And they're like, what do you mean? I've got this amount here in the Roth and this amount on the traditional, and they're both set up the exact same. And I'm thinking, well, the Roth should go 100% to your family and the IRA should go 100% to charity. And because of the taxation, like if you split that 50-50, the charity is going to get 50% of the Roth money, and they're not going to pay any taxes anyway. And you could have given that to your family and they would have had that fully tax free. And then you give away your worst taxable asset. So hopefully that makes sense. I just want to make that super clear. The other thing in talking about CRTs, so what we discussed earlier was gifting like appreciated assets and then in a situation where you're needing income. But there's a way to give it post death as well. So I call it pre and post. And so post death, you can kind of skirt the 10-year IRA rule. And so let's say, for example, today under today's law, Secure Act 2.0 was passed, actually 1.0, this was passed. The non-spouse beneficiary has 10 years to pay the tax and get it out of IRA status. So gone are the days of the stretch IRA where they could stretch it out over their life expectancy. They now have only 10 years. And by the end of that 10th year, they must have all of those IRA assets out and taxes paid. Well, there's a way around that rule, and you can use a CRT. And I think this works really well for families that have really big IRAs and they're not doing any Roth conversion strategies. And Johnny and Susie are going to inherit this, massive IRA. Well, you can make the beneficiary a charitable remainder trust. The money goes into the charitable remainder trust, and they now have 20 years to take the money out. Now, here's the caveat. The stipulation is 10% of that at the end of that 20 year must go to charity. But essentially, now you have a big IRA that's now stretched out over 20 years with the remainder 10% going to charity. But your beneficiaries now have had 20 years of, not deductions, but withdrawals over 20 years versus 10 years. So that can be a tax strategy post-death for the CRT as well.
Yeah, and Chris, that's a great idea, certainly from a planning perspective, and also to add at the end of 20 years, that could wind up the remainder amount going into a donor advised fund, and then the family could then be the continual advisors as far as with that. So, I mean, it's a even further kind of a legacy type of planning scenario too.
Yeah, I think there's so many. Yeah, and you've hit on this multiple times during this episode. There are so many ways to give, and I've seen people who aren't necessarily givers, but you start talking about some of the benefits, like what I just mentioned there. You know, if you're able to drop an IRA into a charitable remainder trust post death, and your kids are able to stretch that money out over 20 years, it could help them out because more than likely, I would say that the majority of our clients, when they pass away and their kids are inheriting assets, especially if it's like qualified money like an IRA or traditional IRA, they're either going to be in their highest income earning years because we know as we age up, typically not for everybody, but typically the older you get, the more you're making because you've been in your careers longer and you're kind of in your peak earning years, as we call it. So you're either going to be there and inheriting a big IRA, or you're going to be in your 60s. 63, we know Medicare starts looking back at your income. And if you're having to take large chunks out of an IRA and pay taxes on it, that's going to impact the IRMAA limits. So there's lots of opportunity from a charitable standpoint where I think families can really just sit down, have a simple conversation with a financial advisor. We like to say if it's with us, great. If it's not, find somebody that you can trust. But I say trust, and we're talking about all these trusts. But find somebody that you can sit down with, have confidence in, and trust them to really help you with what you're trying to do before passing and then after passing. Because I think you hit on that as well. Why not take some of the stuff now and, really take advantage of what's available today?
I think those are all great things, and you're totally spot on that there's just so many options and things to consider, and it's just good to know your options. So I know we only have a couple minutes left, but one thing I wanted to get to before we ended, because you touched on this earlier, Mike. So when you talk about giving, we're not always talking about charitable giving necessarily, because I know sometimes I'll get the question of people say, oh, well, I don't give charitably, but I give money to my kids, or I give money to this family member, or something like that. There's also more efficient ways to be doing that. I know you mentioned earlier with employees of a company. So could you talk through just for a minute, just a couple ways that maybe you guys recommend or you guys help people with as far as gifting to family, gifting to employees, gifting that might not necessarily fall under the tax deduction, but still can have a tax advantage?
Yeah. And I think a lot of it, and again, kind of goes back to their intent, their desire, what are they trying to accomplish? If they're certainly being able to utilize things from family members of what they can do on an annual basis. And of course, being able to leverage the unified exemption too on a lifetime giving. A lot of times people will make gifts to family members and wait till end of life. Why it would make a lot more sense if they could go ahead and do something now and help the young couple trying to get into a new house. From a down payment standpoint, being able to leverage that. So certainly encourage that. Again, just like this other family that I'm thinking of, a major concern was theirs if they had gone to just looking at having a third party coming in and acquiring the business. Their concern, this was a family business. So they really started seeing their employees as really part of the ongoing family. And were concerned that if a private equity firm came in and acquired it, they very well might just, come in and completely either liquidate it or potentially, move everybody out. Yeah, got it. So have seen that happen too. So that was their motivation. And again, looking for strategies to say, no, we want to move this over to the employees so they actually have ownership. And again, setting up the ESOP. And again, that can be done over a staged period of time. So agree. I mean, we love to come alongside, again, to try to be a resource and a guide right along with what you're doing, but certainly bringing in the charitable component. I mean, that's clearly our strong suit. But again, if there's other ways, I would, again, just leverage the benefits that are out there from the standpoint of the tax code. And again, it's very very gracious from a worldly standpoint. So certainly lots of opportunities to be able to pick up on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of this stuff, Mike, when we're talking about putting businesses in a trust and things like that. I guess the message I want to, project here is you want to start early on that. You definitely don't want to be under contract and then try to come back, and you can't at that point. So these are you want to be out in front. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly right. And again, a lot of the benefits we were talking about with the outright gifts, with a closely held business or real estate, and you hit on a key thing. It needs to occur before you get to the point of a binding obligation to sell.
Correct.
You can certainly be talking to people. You can have letters of intent as long as they're non-binding. But really, to pick up a lot of advantage, it has to occur before you enter into a binding obligation. So the more time, the more runway, the better.
Yeah. The reason I bring that up is there's a lot of mavericks out there, and there's a lot of things online. There's so many things on social media that are talked about, and I can't stress enough. If it's not us, that's fine. Pick somebody that if you're encountering one of these situations, you're going to sell a business or you're getting ready to retire, you're charitable, and you just don't know exactly what to do. I just urge caution and seek out advice from someone, that understands how to piece all this stuff together, that can reach out and grab partners like NCF and kind of bring them into the fold and have them as a charitable guide. And then you've got your financial planner, you've got your CPA that you're working with. We like to call it the dream team. So if you're charitable, you're going to add another member to that, a charitable organization. And then you're going to work alongside of them to make sure that you're taking all of the proper steps to make sure that all of your family's wishes are being fulfilled. And you're not only, hitting the charitable thing that you want to do, but now you're also picking up some tax deductibility along the way. And I think that's important. I think many of us want the tax deductibility where we can, as long as it's black and white. So, Mike, it's been awesome having you on the show. I can't thank you enough for taking the time. And then also to Dana Keller here locally for reaching out to us and saying, hey, Mike's available. Do you want to grab him on your show? And we appreciate that. All the knowledge you've shared with all of our listeners, Mike, we appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And great to be with you. And as always, happy to be a resource, a guide. And certainly there locally in Huntsville, please reach out to Dana. We can always love to have conversations. So appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, you got it, Mike. Anytime. And again, thanks a lot. Thanks for everybody listening to the show. Graham, appreciate your input today. Luann's been awfully quiet today. She just kind of sat back. She's probably back there taking notes in the background.
Notes. Yep. I'm going to tell my husband all about it.
Yeah, there we go. So if you would like to set up a discovery session with us, and give us a call at 256-937-2010. Again, the number is 256-937-2010. Hope everybody has an awesome and blessed week. And remember to serve every person in every situation with a servant heart.
Mike Booth and the National Christian Foundation are not affiliated with WG Financial or AE Wealth Management, LLC. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties or guests have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by WG Financial Group. This radio show is a paid placement.
Please remember, converting an employer plan account to a Roth IRA is a taxable event. An increase in taxable income from the Roth IRA conversion may have several consequences. Be sure to consult with a qualified tax advisor before making any decisions regarding your IRA.
Graham Bauer holds the enrolled agent designation, but is not currently offering tax preparation services. Neither the firm nor its agents may give tax advice. Individuals should consult with a qualified professional for guidance before making any purchasing decisions.
Investment advisory services made available through AE Wealth Management, LLC, AEWM. AEWM and WG Financial Group are not affiliated companies. Insurance products are offered through the insurance business WG Insurance Services. WG Financial Group is an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through AE Wealth Management, LLC, AEWM, a registered investment advisor. AEWM does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by WG Insurance Services are not subject to investment advisory requirements. AEWM and WG Financial Group are not affiliated companies. companies. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This radio show is intended for informational purposes only and is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual situation. WG Financial is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. Information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by WG Financial. This radio show is a paid placement.